They heard something. Then they erased the recording. In 1962, a Soviet radio array captured a pulse that should not have existed. Structured, rhythmic, mathematically precise. They called it an echo. But the data showed no source within known physics. The tapes were sealed, the scientists reassigned, the tower dismantled within weeks. Decades later, identical signals appeared in NASA archives and the Australian Parks Observatory logs, each labeled instrumental anomaly. The pattern matched prime intervals, the universal signature of intelligence. But every attempt to analyze it ended the same way. Sudden reclassification, lost data, silence. If it was interference, why erase the evidence? If it was communication, who ordered the blackout? Across 60 years, 10 recordings, verified, then buried. 10 voices from the dark that science tried to ignore. They weren't noise, they were instructions. For 60 years, the story of extraterrestrial contact has been shaped by denial. Scientists recorded patterns that behaved like language, then watched those discoveries vanish behind classified seals. This documentary reopens 10 of those forgotten transmissions, tracing the same chilling pattern: detection, curiosity, translation, suppression. The first case emerged in the Cold War when the Soviet observatory at Zeya logged a returning pulse 4 seconds after broadcast, a physical impossibility. The last surfaced in 2019 when Australia's Parks dish detected a binary code translating to a single phrase: return the archive. Between them lies a chain of erased evidence. Each message shared 3 constants: a repeating prime sequence, a directed origin vector, and a termination signal the moment human decoding began. In every instance, the official explanation was equipment malfunction. Yet, independent audits of raw data, declassified in fragments between 2023 and 2025, show deliberate modulation beyond random noise. The suppressions followed a ritual precision: files reclassified, research teams dissolved, public statements withdrawn. Agencies acted as if obeying an unspoken directive, never acknowledged communication. But in cross-referencing archives from SETI, NASA's Deep Space Network, and European Space Agency telemetry logs, researchers uncovered identical frequency fingerprints. What connects these incidents is not proof of aliens. It's proof of avoidance. Someone or something wants silence more than understanding. Perhaps because the messages were not greetings. They were instructions, coordinates, even warnings. This investigation pieces together what remains: signal graphs, lab notes, recovered metadata. We will not claim contact. We will show the record. You can decide what they feared. Because in March 2025, NASA's Freedom of Information release unsealed 3 forgotten tapes once marked "Do Not Disseminate." And the first story is already classified. It began in winter 1962. The Zeya Radio Observatory, a remote Soviet facility in the Amur Oblast, operated under routine telemetry, monitoring orbital debris and early communication satellites. On January 19th, senior technician Alexei Volkov logged a reflected pulse returning 4.2 seconds after transmission. The array's dish had not moved. There were no lunar reflections, no atmospheric bounce paths. The echo had structure: 3 rising tones, then silence. The team recalibrated. The pattern repeated at exact 90-minute intervals, identical phase and amplitude. "A machine is replying," Volkov wrote in his field log. His superior ordered the tapes copied for Moscow review. That night, the observatory's lights went dark. Days later, the official report cited faulty frequency isolation. but the surviving technicians recalled a military convoy arriving before dawn. Documents seized, film reels removed, and an order forbidding further transmission. The Zeya Tower was dismantled that spring under the guise of modernization. The data, however, had already been duplicated. In 1991, an amateur historian, Irina Korsakova, found partial copies of the logs in the Smolensk Regional Archive. The numbers matched an unclassified NASA telemetry experiment from 1963. Both showed frequency harmonics following prime intervals 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Two observatories, two sides of the Cold War, identical timing. By the mid-1990s, SETI analysts reviewing declassified Soviet data confirmed the anomaly's signature resembled encoded beacon protocols rather than random reflection. One analyst described it as an echo without a source. Within weeks, the project funding was cut. No further publications appeared. Volkov never returned to work. He disappeared after a medical transfer in 1964. His daughter later claimed his notebooks were confiscated for reasons of state secrecy. She still keeps one torn page, stained and brittle. On it, in pencil, her father wrote a single phrase. They answered the wrong way. 30 years later, another signal, louder, longer, unmistakably structured, would make the world listen, then deny it. August 15th, 1977. The Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University captured what remains the most famous unexplained transmission in SETI history. A 72-second burst from the constellation Sagittarius. Researcher Jerry Eman circled the printout and wrote a single word in the margin: "Wow." The media turned it into a curiosity. But the follow-up data, the deeper analysis, never reached the public archive. Weeks after the detection, two technical aides reported that the secondary log reels, those tracking frequency drift, had been removed for calibration. They were never returned. In 1994, astrophysicist Judith Rosen examined backup printouts for a graduate thesis. Hidden in the carrier noise, she noticed checksum intervals, mathematical markers used in digital communication. The pattern was too orderly for natural emission, a sequence of 1 times 3 and 7 cycle bursts repeating every 107 seconds. Then her research grant was abruptly reassigned to Signal Interpretation Security. By 1995, NASA's high-resolution microwave survey had been defunded, and the WOW anomaly became a footnote in popular science. But in 2008, a Freedom of Information request revealed a one-page memo labeled Reclassification Protocol 77B. The instruction: cease replication of burst pattern to prevent recursive resonance. The wording suggests the signal was duplicated internally, and that duplication triggered a containment directive. Eamon, now retired, refused interviews. When asked in 2012 if the data could have been terrestrial, he paused. If it was, we'd have found the transmitter. He never elaborated. The humane loss hides in the margins. Rosen abandoned astrophysics. I felt watched, she wrote in a private letter. Every time I tuned that frequency, something answered in silence. Then she vanished from the academic record after 1996. No obituary, no trace. 6 years later, a French satellite would detect a whispering pulse from beneath Antarctic ice on the very same prime sequence. January 1983. The French satellite Étoile 3 was tasked with relaying low-orbit telemetry from southern research stations. During a routine pass above Antarctica, its onboard spectrometer registered a narrow-band signal emerging from the ice itself, a sustained modulation at 1420.356 MHz. the hydrogen line reserved for cosmic observation. Ground control in Toulouse confirmed the signal source lay 3,000 meters below the East Antarctic Plateau, near coordinates 81 degrees, 128 degrees. No transmitters existed within 1,000 kilometers. The data packet lasted 9 minutes, repeating a 5-digit binary rhythm before cutting off mid-sequence. The onboard recorder logged the waveform as self-referential, meaning it encoded instructions to reconstruct itself, an advanced compression rarely seen outside human engineering. The analysis team requested an emergency review with CNES, France's space agency. 3 days later, the lead technician, Marc Delaunay, failed to report for duty. His apartment was sealed by military custodianship. Officially, Étoile 3 experienced an onboard computer malfunction. Yet the recovered telemetry, quietly archived by Delaunay's assistant, revealed harmonic intervals matching those of the 1962 Zeya pulse and the 1977 WOW signature. Prime sequences again. Identical spacing, identical termination pattern. The Echo had traveled from space to Earth, and now, beneath it. In 1998, an independent researcher, Dr. Pauline Mercier, accessed the long-forgotten data through a European Space Archive digitization grant. 2 months later, she published a preliminary analysis showing the waveform contained an embedded timestamp predating the signal by 47 years. When journalists asked how a transmission could reference a date before it was received, her university revoked her server credentials, citing export control concerns. Delaunay's personal journal surfaced posthumously through his brother. One entry reads, "It's not from above, it's waiting below." He missed his son's birth that winter. The coordinates remain under international environmental protection, off limits to excavation. 8 years later, NASA's Deep Space Network would intercept a binary string echoing all 3 prior events, then delete the raw feed within hours. March 2, 1991. At the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in California, engineers were recalibrating a 70-meter antenna for a Voyager 2 alignment. During the test cycle, a separate telemetry channel, unused, unscheduled, activated itself. The console displayed a perfect binary pattern repeating 13 prime numbers: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, and onward. The modulation was steady, deliberate, without any background noise. It lasted exactly 11 minutes. The engineers saved the raw data, labeling it Unidentified Telemetry Crossfeed. 2 hours later, Mission Control flagged the file for review under a restricted Signal Containment Directive. When the staff returned the next morning, the system log showed deletion authorization from an encrypted administrator account. No one admitted issuing it. Electrical engineer Robert Hayes, who had initiated the backup, discovered his copy missing from the magnetic drive. Within weeks, his security clearance was downgraded, and his assignment transferred to a ground systems test in Nevada. Hayes filed a quiet whistleblower complaint in 1992. The reply came in one sentence: "No record of anomalous telemetry exists." But fragments remained. Independent archivists later found that the 1991 signal's checksum corresponded to the 1983 Antarctic relay. Identical phase offsets, identical fall-off curve. The data implied synchronization between a satellite detection and a terrestrial source 8 years apart. When confronted, NASA cited clock error propagation. Yet the internal maintenance logs list system clocks verified to the microsecond. In 2005, a former DSN contractor leaked a redacted internal memo referencing pattern 77Z. The memo stated, "Do not retransmit. Recursive modulation may trigger recontact." No public explanation followed. Hayes died in 2007. His daughter later sold his estate. Among the papers was a printed hex dump of the lost transmission. At the bottom, handwritten in blue ink, "They're using our own timing to reply. He missed his daughter's wedding." If these first three were coincidences, Story 4 will test that theory. March 3, 2001. The Arecibo Observatory was running calibration sweeps in tribute to its original 1974 interstellar message, a binary hello humanity had once sent toward the M13 star cluster. That morning, a mirrored signal arrived at the same frequency band. Identical duration, identical framing, but reversed. It was as if the cosmos had played our own call backward. Dr. Emilio Vargas, the senior engineer on site, ordered a full data capture. The waveform included a secondary modulation, an encryption layer unseen in the original transmission. When decoded, it rendered a grid of symbols forming a distorted human outline. The control team argued over interference, but Vargas insisted on independent analysis. Within 48 hours, the data servers were confiscated under an order referencing Strategic Communications Oversight. The technicians were reassigned. 2 weeks later, Arecibo released a press statement. Signal inconsistency due to ground echo reflection. The public never saw the encrypted layer. But in 2017, fragments resurfaced in a retired engineer's private archive. The checksum, again, matched the 1991 Goldstone signal and the 1983 Antarctic pattern. Prime intervals, fixed phase, identical termination frequency. Then came the silencing. Vargas was invited to speak at a SETI conference in Geneva. On arrival, he was informed his credentials had been revoked for security reassessment. He returned to San Juan, withdrew from all projects, and lived quietly until 2008. In his final interview, he said only, "They sent back what we broadcast. They knew we were listening." Some scientists maintain this was a coincidence of atmospheric reflection, Arecibo's immense power causing a backscatter through the ionosphere. A plausible theory, if not for one inconsistency. The mirrored signal carried checksum markers from 1974 digital encoding that had been lost to hardware obsolescence. It knew the structure better than our own records did. Vargas never returned to research. "It answered me," he once told a student, "but not in my language." 8 years later, aboard the International Space Station, a new message would bypass antennas altogether, arriving directly through the hull. June 14, 2009. Expedition 20, aboard the International Space Station, reported a persistent clicking within an unused communications band, channel 18, reserved for ground telemetry. The pattern resembled slow Morse code, 3 short, 2 long, repeating at 23-second intervals. Audio engineers on Earth dismissed it as static harmonics caused by solar interference. Yet Commander Pavel Orlov disagreed. "It sounds deliberate," he noted in his duty log. During a scheduled maintenance window, Orlov recorded 47 seconds of the anomaly through the onboard signal processor. The waveform displayed ordered gaps, structured pauses corresponding to binary spacing. When he requested a playback through Houston, the file vanished from the downlink queue. The channel was locked, labeled corrupted transmission data. Hours later, Orlov's terminal reset itself, wiping his session logs. 4 days after, NASA's internal message board listed a temporary signal containment human factors investigation. Orlov was advised not to comment publicly. Privately, he confided to flight engineer Koichi Wakata that the clicking moved when he spoke aloud, as if responding to sound vibration through the hull. Then it stopped. Months later, declassified internal maintenance schedules revealed a 3-hour communications blackout, logged as a safety simulation. but the recorded timestamps overlap precisely with Orlov's personal note. The pattern went silent at 0422 GMT, then returned once, 5 tones, rising. The same 5-tone signature appears in archival data from Arecibo's 2001 event. Orlov returned to Earth in December, declining all interviews. He retired within a year. "It followed me down," he told a colleague once. "When I close my eyes, I still hear it." He missed his son's 5th birthday during quarantine. A skeptical review later suggested a shorted coupling in the station's communication array could produce rhythmic arcs mimicking coded sound. Yet no such hardware failure was ever recorded. And then, 6 months later, the ISS software received an unscheduled firmware patch titled Directive 18A, Signal Integrity Protocol. The content remains redacted. From here on, the pattern stops asking for permission. September 28, 2012. Deep in the mountains of Guizhou Province, China's newly completed 500-meter aperture spherical telescope, FAST, came online for its first deep sky calibration. At 0241 local time, the central feed detected a narrow-band pulse aimed directly at Earth from the direction of Cygnus. The frequency was unmistakable. 1420-356 MHz, the hydrogen line again, the universal language of radio astronomy. But this time, the modulation wasn't random. It mirrored the exact harmonic structure of the 1962 Zeya Echo. 50 years later, the same pattern had returned. Lead astronomer Dr. Liang Xu logged a continuous 6-minute signal, rising, falling, then repeating every 4.2 seconds, the same delay the Soviets recorded half a century before. She submitted the data for peer review. Within hours, state communication officials arrived at the site, ordering cessation of all transmissions. The event was reclassified under environmental interference. Unofficially, junior engineer Zhang Wei duplicated the raw binary stream before the purge. His later analysis found an embedded coordinate pair referencing the Antarctic Plateau, 81 degrees, 128 degrees, the origin point of the 1983 signal. 3 continents, 3 eras, 1 frequency. A week later, Zhang disappeared en route to Beijing to deliver the data. Local authorities ruled it an accident. Vehicle lost in flood. His family never recovered his personal drives. The following year, when China joined an international radio quiet zone agreement with Russia and the United States, the coordinates 81 to GS, 128 to GE were specifically listed as restricted, citing geophysical preservation. No such clause had existed before. Satellite spectrograms released inadvertently in 2014 show the pulse was not inbound, but outbound. Something beneath the ice had replied to the stars. Dr. Liang has not spoken publicly since. Her colleagues describe her as professionally isolated. One letter she mailed to a former mentor contained only a single typed sentence. "It's not looking at us. It's calling home." 3 years later, at CERN, an experiment would capture that same timing, inside a neutrino detector meant to prove nothing of the sort. April 9, 2015. The compact muon solenoid experiment at CERN recorded a data corruption event during a proton beam calibration. The signal appeared inside a neutrino detector channel, one that should have been silent. For 19 seconds, the readout displayed a pattern of high-energy pulses arranged in prime intervals. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. The same rhythm first logged at Zeya in 1962, then at FAST in 2012. Only this time the pattern was inverted, counting downward, not up. Technicians assumed a timing loop error until they noticed something impossible. The pulses arrived before the beam cycle initiated, as if responding to an event that hadn't yet occurred. The term pre-echo entered the internal memo. When cross-checked against satellite timing, the offset measured 4.2 seconds, the exact Zeya delay mirrored through time. Project physicist Dr. Mireli Novak archived the anomaly for later review. 2 days later, her access credentials were revoked. Her workstation was reformatted under a security order labeled Quantum Channel Sanitation. When questioned, CERN Communications described it as a standard data integrity sweep. But fragments recovered by a sympathetic colleague revealed an embedded call sign hidden in the bit stream, A13 Zeya. The correspondence was undeniable. 53 years after the first echo, the same signature had bled into a particle experiment designed to detect the smallest known forces. The suppression followed the now familiar choreography: hardware lockdown, statement withdrawal, silence. Dr. Novak fled to Prague, giving a brief interview to a science podcast in 2016. "We saw timing that contradicts causality," she said. "Either the universe folded, or someone outside of it did." It was her last public appearance. She missed her father's funeral that spring. When internal CERN documentation was later reviewed under the European Transparency Act, auditors found one unredacted line in the deleted protocol: "Terminate interface, recursion approaching threshold." The pattern had crossed from radio to matter itself. 4 years later, during a thunderstorm in Australia, the park's observatory would receive the final message: binary, direct, and human. July 17, 2019. The park's radio telescope in New South Wales, Australia, recorded a brief, coherent burst during an electrical storm. It began as static, then stabilized into binary. The operator, Dr. Evelyn Markham, decoded the first 16 bits and froze. The translation, using ASCII protocol, formed 2 words: return archive. At first, staff assumed lightning interference or an internal feedback loop. But post-storm diagnostics showed no hardware fault. The signal's origin vector triangulated to low Earth orbit, an empty patch of sky. And when compared to legacy SETI data, its harmonic spacing matched the 2015 CERN pulses and the 1962 Zeya pattern down to the 6th decimal. Same prime interval cadence, same fall-off curve. Markham reported the finding to the Australian Space Agency. Within 24 hours, the observatory's remote access was revoked, citing systemic contamination. Security contractors arrived, instructing staff to leave the premises. Data servers were physically removed. The official press release attributed the interruption to lightning damage. But Markham had printed the first waveform. A small thermal sheet she kept in her notebook survived. Later, spectral analysis revealed an embedded audio layer beneath the binary. Ultrasonic, but structured. When slowed by a factor of 42, it resembled a whispering human voice repeating the same phrase, distorted, yet unmistakable. They still have it. Parks reopened 2 weeks later. No reference to the incident remains in its public archives. Staff received non-disclosure renewals valid until 2045. Markham resigned, moved to Tasmania, and has not granted interviews since. In October 2020, leaked maintenance reports showed that during the shutdown, technicians found electromagnetic scoring on the dish's inner surface, etched patterns forming 5 concentric rings. The same geometry appeared in declassified photographs from the 1983 Antarctic relay site. The breadcrumb loop had closed. Zeya, Antarctica, CERN, Parks, 4 continents, 1 instruction: return the archive. Markham wrote in her final email to a colleague, "Maybe it's not them asking for it. Maybe it's us." The following year, a private satellite firm would capture one last transmission: clear voice, English, and a date we haven't reached yet. April 22, 2024. The private aerospace company Heliosat Systems launched a low-orbit relay satellite, Aquila 9, designed to monitor atmospheric radiation. 41 hours into operation, the satellite registered an unlisted incoming feed on its maintenance channel, a direct voice transmission in English. The audio lasted 14 seconds, 3 words repeated twice. November 11, return archive. Telemetry confirmed no other transmitters within range. The file carried a digital fingerprint traced to the same binary checksum as the 2019 Parkes signal. Identical pattern, identical timing, identical silence afterward. Engineers flagged it as a phantom test loop. But the system timestamp preceded the command initiation by 4.2 seconds. The Zeya delay. The loop was impossible. Heliosat contacted the European Space Agency for verification. Hours later, the satellite's uplink keys were revoked. Ground control lost access. Aquila 9 was ordered into a deorbit burn, officially for malfunction risk. The debris never reached the ocean. The radar trace simply vanished midway through re-entry. An internal Heliosat technician leaked a short transcript before the shutdown. At the end of the 14 seconds, faint background noise rose behind the voice. A rhythm of 5 ascending tones, the same tonal ladder first recorded in 1962. He described hearing something else under the static, like another voice trying to count backward. When confronted, both NASA and ESA denied any knowledge of shared telemetry. Yet an encrypted file dated November 11, 2025, exactly 1 year ahead, appeared in a European data center index, unopenable, labeled Archive Pending. The breadcrumb had completed its circuit. Every signal, every recurrence, every suppression had led here, toward a scheduled moment that hasn't yet arrived. Heliosat quietly dissolved that autumn. Its directors signed non-disclosure agreements and vanished from public record. And if the pattern holds, if the timing repeats, the next transmission will not come from the sky. It will emerge from within our own networks, which means the countdown ends in less than a year. At 0422 GMT, November 11th, 2025. The transmission stopped. Or maybe we stopped listening. For 6 decades, the same pattern emerged and vanished across continents and generations. It crossed languages, governments, even mediums of physics. Each time, intelligence whispered through numbers. Each time, authority sealed it in silence. The evidence never screamed. It waited, encoded in harmonics and time delays, repeating the same quiet demand: return the archive. One could argue these were coincidences, errors shaped by human longing for connection. Perhaps random noise masquerades as order when we wish to find meaning. But coincidences don't repeat prime sequences across half a century. They don't predict timestamps a year in advance. If intelligence truly reached us, it understood 2 things: that we would listen, and that we would deny. The deeper question is not who sent the signals, but why the denials stayed identical. Someone decided humanity wasn't ready to know what answered back. If communication exists beyond known physics, then the sender isn't lost among stars. It's woven into the machinery we built to search for it. Every data loop, every encrypted relay, every mirrored pulse might already contain its voice, waiting for recognition. And if the next message comes not from the sky, but from within our own systems, our satellites, our servers, our reflections in the digital noise, will we recognize it as alien, or as ourselves? Calling from another timeline we still refuse to believe in? Because ignoring the unknown doesn't erase it. It waits. Recorded, coded, still counting down. Binary question. Archive it or delete it. This video is created for analysis and storytelling. Sources are public. Approach extraordinary claims with healthy skepticism.